Grace and peace, and welcome to Crackers and Grape Juice, the podcast where we talk about faith without using stained glass language. I'm Tier Hardy, joined today by my dear friend, my partner in ministry, my mentor, Jason Michelli.
Hi.
And on this episode, you just blew the speakers out of everybody's cars with that. But on today's episode, we have a conversation with Brian Kaler. Brian is the editor and president of Word and Way. He is an award-winning writer, sought-after expert on the issues of politics, religion, and communication. He has a PhD in communications from the University of Missouri, and a bunch of other accolades that you can find over on his bio at wordandway.org.
If you've already listened to all the episodes of Crackers and Grape Juice at least 5 times, then possibly you can check out Brian's podcast, Baptist Without an Adjective, but only then.
I like that. I like this. I think that's a solid podcast title.
He is also the author of 4 books on religion and politics, including Vote Your Principles, Sacramental Politics, and 2 others that I can't recall off the top of my head.
Well, one of them is titled For God's Sake, Shut Up. So that would be, we could just stop it right here with that, but that wouldn't tell people what they should do as they're listening, Jason.
What should they do, Tier?
They should go to crackersandgrapejuice.com. They should subscribe to the
solid professional segue right there.
They should become patrons of the podcast or subscribe to Crackers and Grape Juice Plus, our bi-monthly newsletter. It goes out on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, or Thursdays, twice a month, depending on when we get our act together. We've got a bonus episode of that podcast in the month of June. So if you're a subscriber, head on over and check out the latest conversation that Jason and I had with the Minion. You can also like this or like our Facebook page, share stuff online. At this point, I feel like most of our listeners know how to leverage the power of social media. So go.
Never make assumptions, Tier.
I make lots of assumptions.
It makes an ass out of you and umption.
Speaking of ass, that comes up in the podcast people are about to listen to. So they should go and listen to it.
They should. Have a great summer whenever it is you listen to this.
Remember to wear your sunscreen.
Semper ubi sub ubi. Always wear underwear. So I saw you used to teach at James Madison University.
I did, yeah. I was there for about 6 years. Yeah.
So what can you tell us about James? Neither one of us went there, but we know lots of people who went there.
I've driven I've driven under the bridge that goes down.
Yeah, right.
81 like 100 times.
Yeah, that's right. It was a good school. I really enjoyed it. I mean, it was a good time for us personally as a family in Virginia. We really connected well there, and it was a good time. And then it was time to leave. But I enjoyed it. I had great colleagues. One of the things that was fun teaching there, I'd also taught some classes in Missouri, and but teaching political communication. And so teaching students at James Madison, most of them were doing internships in DC. In the summer. And so it was just a whole different caliber of in-class conversations for political communication courses, which I enjoyed a lot.
And so you're in Missouri now?
I am. I'm in Jefferson City, Missouri.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. We've been in the news this week. We're like the worst state for COVID now. To be fair, that's Southwest Missouri, but that is where I went to college, is like one of the worst counties now because like 20% of the people are vaccinated and that's it. So we are wondering why we're back in Missouri now. So.
That's funny. The last time, the last time I was in Missouri was with Tier at the United Methodist Church's General Conference.
That's right.
We were in St. Louis.
Yeah, great memories. I'm sure that was a fun meeting.
And I vowed to never go back to St. Louis, and then my wife booked a family vacation for us, and both of our layovers heading out and coming back were in St. Louis.
Yeah.
Despite my warnings, Tier insisted that we go to White Castle. And I was like, it's not as good as the movie. It's not as good as the movie. And we went, and it made all of us sick. So
it was a wonderful experience, though.
Yeah. Steamed beef is not a good thing. So you are the editor and president of Word and Way. You write a whole lot of articles for like places like the Washington Post and the Houston Chronicle and CNN. You have also written 4 books on religion and politics. So, what is this this drive you have? You have an older brother you're trying to out-achieve?
I am the older brother. I don't know. I love writing. I've always enjoyed reading, researching, and writing. I've held some different careers. I was a professor for 6 years, and even then I always saw myself as a writer first. I enjoy the classroom. I enjoy the experience there. But one of the reasons I left was because I wanted to do more writing, and more writing that people would read, because academic publishing doesn't always get very many eyeballs, to put it nicely.
Yeah. So for listeners who aren't familiar with Word and Way, tell us, before we talk specifically about stuff, so tell us a little bit about the work you do there.
Yeah. So we started in 1896. We're celebrating 125 years. And we've had some different life during that time. We started as an independent publication covering different types of Baptists in the region. It was founded in Kansas City, Missouri, but had writers and staff at one point in Oklahoma, well, before it was a state, Kansas, Colorado, and covering the region. That went on for about 50 years, and then spent about 55 years as the official publication of the Southern Baptist Convention State Convention in Missouri. And then 20 years ago, went back to being independent and covering a variety of types of Baptists and other Christians across our region and beyond. And so we do a lot of things. We still have a monthly magazine. We have the website wordandway.org. We have a couple of podcasts, Baptist Without an Adjective, that I've been doing for 3 years. And we just launched Dangerous Dogma, which is some good, fun conversations with some people that are challenging some of the dangerous stuff in Christianity. And we also have a Substack newsletter, a Public Witness, that we launched in May as well. And that's been a lot of fun, thinking about faith and politics and some kind of deeper analysis.
So you hear that, Tier? They're our primary competition now.
I'm wondering why we're still doing this episode at this point.
A hostile takeover.
Oh, that's right. I've seen you on the charts on Substack, and we're gunning for you. So there we go.
So Brian, I was looking at some of the stuff you've written, and it occurred to me that 2 things seem kind of relevant for the time that we're recording. And so the Southern Baptist Convention in Nashville just happened a week ago. And we're recording the week of 4th of July, which the Sunday of 4th of July weekend is always the first Sunday for new pastors in the United Methodist Church, which is
oh man, baptism by fire, huh?
Yeah, an occasion for sin. So I thought, you can pick your poison. You can pick your poison. You can choose to talk about how it's not just our political square, the public square is infected with religion, but our religion is infected with our politics. Or you can go with our current cultural obsession with critical race theory and how just racist dogma has infected all parts of our Christian practice.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you gave me some easy topics. So, I was in Nashville at the Occupational Hazard for the Southern Baptist Convention meeting and covered that. And that was an interesting experience. 20,000 people in a room is a big gathering anytime, but especially after the last year when I haven't been around more than 5 people at a time. That was just, and 98, 99% of them are not wearing masks. And I know that
they probably weren't the whole year previous, right?
Yeah, right. I know they're not vaccinated.
Why start now?
Right. Probably below the national average on vaccination. So that was alarming. I wore my mask, one, because, maybe 3 reasons. I wanted to protect myself, even though I am fully vaccinated. And also I wanted to kind of remind them that they should be wearing masks. And also it gave me a little bit of anonymity. I didn't want people to recognize me as well. So that's also a little helpful. So, that was an interesting experience. And then, you connect this to July 4th coming up, which I tell you, that's the Sunday. So I guess I wouldn't make it as a United Methodist pastor because that's the Sunday I always skip.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I literally never.
That's Associate Pastor Sunday, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. In fact, I've written a piece for Americans United and for their magazine Church and State about why, as a Baptist minister, I'm skipping church on Sunday, July 4th, because it's even worse that the July 4th is actually on Sunday.
Yep.
This year. And
have you seen the program? I've seen the program for Robert. Is it Robert Jeffries? Is that his name?
First Baptist Dallas. Yes.
I mean that what they do is, it looks like just a parody of what goes on in other churches.
That's right. I mean, it's they call it Freedom Sunday, which
they didn't even do on July 4th. It was the 27th. It was this past
week.
They did
it. Yeah. And which I guess they thought because they're afraid everyone would be out on family vacation, they wanted a good attendance or something. I don't know why they did it a week early.
And they're probably not reading from Galatians for Freedom Sunday.
Yeah, that's right.
Freedom Sunday, fireworks are cheaper. Fireworks are cheaper
Easter.
on the
I mean,
Sunday
let's be
before.
honest. Like if we're gonna have Freedom Sunday, that's Easter. And so but they have the fireworks going on in the sanctuary, which I mean, it sounds like a great show. Like, I mean, it really would be, I'm sure, something you could sell tickets to. But I worry. I wonder sometimes when I watch some of these services or I see some of the signs. I was out driving today and passed a church that has, their big sign out in front of their church with the cross and everything. Then has the flag waving on the video screen and it says "God bless America." And I wonder, like, who are we worshiping at some point? Is the question. And I'll tell you, this really, really came to me. When I lived in Virginia for 6 years, we were members of a Mennonite congregation out there. Okay. And it was just
for listeners, Eastern Mennonite Seminary is
that's right. We lived about a mile from Eastern Mennonite College and Seminary there in Harrisonburg, which was great. I could bike up to campus and see some of the speakers that they were bringing onto campus. And we got really plugged into a Mennonite church there. One of the things we most miss about Virginia is that church. And so one of the Sundays, one year we came back, we had been out there probably 4 or 5 years. We came back to visit family in Missouri, and it happened to be the 4th of July Sunday. And I'm in church and, the American flag is up on stage, which I hadn't seen one in the church stage, for years. And it caught my eye now. And then they're singing all the patriotic hymns. Mm-hmm. And while I grew up in that tradition and I grew up singing those, having been out of it for like 4 years, there was something about it that it finally hit me. Like, I can't do this. Like, this doesn't feel right. There's something wrong. And so ever since then, I've just always skipped church on that Sunday. Sometimes we'll go camping in the woods just to get away from everything. Sometimes I've been actually overseas with Babel's World Alliance meetings, which is a whole different experience than to be worshiping with people from 50 different countries and instead of, worshiping America. And so that's been really good for my soul just to skip church that Sunday.
It reminds me of, I don't know if you've seen Ted Lasso or not, but there's a scene where Ted Lasso wants to give one of his soccer players from Nigeria who misses home. He wants to give him a little toy soldier that his son back in America has sent him. And the soccer player is like, thanks, coach. My dad always meant a lot to me, blah, blah, blah. He's like, can I give this back to you? And he's like, what? And he's like, I don't have the same affection for the U.S. military that you do.
Yeah. But, let's connect that to the SBC meeting. So, I mean, they have the God and country moment to start off the SBC meeting as well. And again, which was also particularly embedded with military, and we start mixing our language about liberty and sacrifice. And we use these same words to describe Jesus as we also use to describe the military. And that starts to really, I think, create some dangerous theology there as we start conflating who's dying for who here. But also they had a resolution that they were supposed to be considering to denounce the January 6th attack. Mm-hmm. And they didn't. They pulled it at the last minute.
That was a gathering of tourists.
Yeah, that's
slowly
right.
Moving through the building. I don't know what you all
I have
watched.
been a tourist at the Capitol, and I thankfully, never saw that looked like what I saw on television on January 6th. And I as I got to think about it, I was talking to a couple other reporters there, and we're trying to figure out like what happened, why did they pull this, and they never really would give a good answer. The SBC leaders were basically like, well, we thought it was going to take a lot of time. We expected a lot of debate, a lot of amendments, and we wanted to focus on more important things. And I'm thinking, well, what's more important than denouncing, Christian nationalism in January 6th in the year 2021? But apparently they thought there were more important things. But I got to thinking, like, we got 20,000 people here. What are the odds that one of them, 81% of white evangelicals voted for Trump, one of them was at the Capitol that day? And actually, I actually have later learned that there was at least one pastor who was at the SBC meeting who was on the steps of the Capitol on January 6th. And I'm sure there were others. And so,
I met a guy at a funeral yesterday that I did who was there.
Wait, how does that come up in a conversation at a funeral? Like, That's what I'm wondering.
It came up in the context of no, you can't wear your handgun here in church.
Got it. Then,
So
I could bring it to the Capitol.
That's right. Yeah, it's I think they didn't want to have that debate, and I think they knew that there would be amendments, there would be conversation, and maybe they didn't want the bad publicity of having that, and so instead they took the easy way out of not denouncing it. And I think that's what I'm afraid of right now, and I'm afraid of happens too much on July 4th is, you made the joke about putting the associate pastor in charge, and I get that because we don't want to get fired, and then yet at the same time we're not leaning into this moment where we have a heresy that has overtaken our churches. And as we saw on January 6th, as we saw with Mother Emanuel, and we saw with Tree of Life Synagogue, it can be dangerous. It can be deadly.
Yeah.
And I think we've got to do that hard work in our churches of separating out who are we worshiping and who are we giving true allegiance to, because you can only give allegiance. You can only pledge allegiance to one. I mean, if you look at the word allegiance, it comes from the French, and it's talking about the loyalty you owe to your Lord. That's what the word means. And Jesus teaches this very clearly, that you cannot serve two masters. And we try to pretend like we're doing both. We'll put both flags on our stage in church, right? We'll put the American flag and the Christian flag. So see, we're doing like a two kingdom thing, but we always put the American flag, if it's on stage, it's to the right of the preacher. And then if it's on the floor level, it's the other direction, because that's what the U.S. flag code says. It says it's the place of preeminence. So we're already saying in our very churches with the structure, America first, Christian kingdom second. Like, that's the order we're putting the flags. And some churches do it even worse. They'll put them on the same pole, and they'll follow the U.S. flag code and put the American flag on top and the Christian flag second. I mean, at that point, we're not pledging allegiance to the kingdom. It's just getting, sloppy leftovers whenever it happens to agree with the kingdom that we're actually pledging allegiance to.
Yeah, whenever someone tries to tell me like, we have the Christian flag too, and I'm like, well, all right, so can you close your eyes and draw that flag for me? Because there's no way you can reproduce it in your memory. Like you don't even notice it. That's nonsense.
But don't dare switch them, or people will get upset.
Yeah.
I talked to a pastor one time, and one of the staff had switched the two in the sanctuary, and the next Sunday when they came back in, they were put back, because we really do know it matters. The order matters. And I know another church where they removed them during the pandemic, just because no one's in the sanctuary for a year. They thought, let's take them out. They haven't gone back inside yet. So we'll see if anybody notices that they're gone.
But what you're pointing out is, and what I've discovered as a pastor is, I mean, it's certainly true in United Methodism, and I suspect in the Baptist tradition as well, that most of people's Christianity is so steeped in American civil religion that they don't have the discipleship or categories to even understand like where you're coming from.
Yeah, I mean, that's the danger, right? It's that, how do we separate out what's American? And I don't mean that to say that it's bad, but it's just that it's not gospel, right? It's different. Like, there can be good American things that don't rise to the level of gospel. They may work for our culture, but they're not universal. But how do we separate out those teachings and those ideas from what is actually in Scripture? And I think we do a bad job of it. And it's difficult. I mean, when you only know your culture, I mean, it can be hard for any culture. But I think it's more imperative when you live in the global empire to do that difficult work. I mean, if we lived in, Moldova or something, I'm not sure we would have to worry as much about being countercultural. But when we live in the global empire and we're reading a text that is primarily written in the shadow of empires and challenging the empires of their day, whether that be Egypt or Babylon or Rome, then I think we have to be really careful that we don't get sucked in to the teachings and the mindset of the new empire.
I mean, like Stanley Hauerwas talks about how the danger of the flag in sanctuaries is that it gestures to a liturgy that is more deeply felt by most people. That the bread and the wine don't elicit such an emotional attachment as the flag does for a great many people in the pews.
Which is by design. So, I mean, when you go and look at some of the modern state philosophers, Hobbes, Rousseau, and so forth, that helped create these, liberal modern states that we have, like they're really concerned about global Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Rousseau even talks about communion. Like he's concerned about communion and the fact that if I recognize that I'm part of a kingdom with people on the other side of this man-made line, then I might not go to war to fight them because we're together. We're in communion with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so the national sovereignty demands that we privatize religion and that we make it that something that is confined by national boundaries. And so what I've been hoping people can realize is that if the architects of our modern nation states saw global Christianity as the greatest threat to nationalism, we should return the favor and realize that nationalism is the greatest threat to Christianity.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh man.
So I mean, you mentioned this in your article on Russell Moore recently. So you go all the way back to Albert Mohler and kind of the conservative takeover of the Southern Baptist Convention. And so there's a sense in which the Southern Baptist Convention is just a microcosm of what, one half of America, right? And so the same purge that happened in the Southern Baptist Convention is a similar purge as to what's happened to the Republican Party under Donald Trump. And so talk about the dangers that come with holding on to Orthodox Christianity when you've essentially pushed out any contrary views or voices.
Yeah, that's a great question because, I get the temptation of thinking of like, this is the way I think things be. I mean, I'm opinionated. I have opinions about what the Bible means and how we should apply it to our lives. And I get the idea of wanting to make sure that people agree with that and believe that, right? And that, I'm going to correct their false ideas and understandings. I completely get that temptation. I also recognize that I'm fallible, right? And I think that's the humility that is often missing in fundamentalism, is that we can draw this line and exclude others, and we can control who's in and who's out. And the danger from that is that, I mean, Scripture doesn't even do that. Like they're conflicting. I mean, Bergman has done a great job, I think, of talking about this and helping us to see this. But like, there's conflicting ideas, and they're arguing with each other. And I think we really lose something when we start getting a room together of everyone who looks and sounds and thinks just like we do. I mean, I hadn't taken your invite on critical race theory yet, but when the Southern Baptist Seminary presidents decided to ban critical race theory from their campuses, we have 6 white guys got together in a Zoom room. They did it virtually, but they got together in a Zoom room, and they've admitted they didn't consult with black pastors. They didn't talk to others. These 6 white guys decided, we're going to ban this, which, I mean, if we want to talk about if you want to justify critical race theory, like talk about 6 white guys coming together to ban what we teach about race. I mean, if that's not a justification, I mean, especially when the guy who wrote the statement, Al Mohler, sits on a campus with buildings named for enslavers, and it only exists today because of the money that they gained stolen off the forced labor of black Africans, right? And then he's now going to ban what we can and cannot teach about race today. I mean, if that doesn't tell us why we need critical race theory, I mean, I don't know what would. And so there really is this danger of excluding other opinions and other ideas to the point that we would all look and sound exactly the same. But that's a lot easier. I mean, that's an easier community to be a part of. I get that. It's messy though, when we start having this community that crosses ethnicities and it crosses ideologies and even denominations and nationalities. Like, that's a messy kingdom that we're invited to be a part of.
So are you just Baptist?
Yeah, that's good. Just Baptist. Yeah, I don't know what I am these days. I grew up Southern Baptist. I did a pastoral internship at a church that was part American Baptist, part Cooperative Baptist. The church I'm a member of is Cooperative Baptist, and ChurchNet, which is a whole nother group just in the state of Missouri. So I generally, so my first podcast is Baptist without an adjective. That's kind of both to have a bunch of different denominational identities and people across these lines coming together for conversations, but it's also kind of how I am. Like, I don't have an adjective very good with who I am.
So we're gonna get there eventually, Jason. Like we'll be Methodists without an adjective.
Without the
I like it. We can have a whole we don't have to be competition, guys. We could come together and have like a whole without an adjective, media market kingdom here that we could build.
One of the articles that you wrote that Bo sent me. And so, all right. So who is this Bo guy, and what have you done that he is such a fan of yours?
Oh yeah, we want to talk about my Bo. So Bo Underwood is a good friend of mine. So Bo is one of those guys that I met online before I met in person, like on Twitter.
Oh, he's a Josh Redderer. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I guess he bought one of my books, which puts him in a very small select group. So I appreciate it. I like to use the Will Campbell line. He was being too humble, but I can actually say it, that I'm an author of rare books. And so I'm on Twitter one day. So I guess he bought my book and said something nice. So I followed him back. And he was working at Sojourners at the time. And so I had just moved back to Missouri. I'm in Jefferson City, and I'm walking downtown towards the Capitol. And I'm scrolling through Twitter, and I see this person announce, "Hey, I'm moving to Jefferson City." And I thought, I live there. Wait, who is this guy? Like, why do I follow him? And so I said, this is like 7 years ago. So I sent him a DM, and when he came to town, we went out to eat, and we've been, going to do lunch about every week ever since. And so he has transitioned kind of out of a pastoral ministry role at Disciples of Christ Church. And so I've brought him on staff. He's part-time with Word and Way and doing some writing for us and some development work. And then also he's working on his doctoral studies at the University of Missouri. And so we're good friends that have been trying to solve all the world's problems over chips and salsa. And now we're actually going to try to work together on that as well.
So what I hear you saying is you're willing to give jobs to people.
That's right. I mean, so now if Bo does his job right, we will have more money to be able to hire more people. So, check back in with us.
All right. Because depending on how things go in the Methodist Church, we may be looking for jobs.
That's right. Well,
down the road. But all right. So does Bo Underwood, with a name like Bo Underwood, I picture someone with dirty blonde hair who always wears a seersucker suit. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know that I don't think the suit fits, but
okay. All right. Yeah. So one of the articles he sent me though was a story that I didn't know, and I think it relates to what you were talking about just a bit ago. It was about how the state of Missouri chose to honor Rush Limbaugh, but not its civil rights heroes. Give listeners a little bit of the context here and talk about that. Yeah.
So last summer, when the Reverend C.T. Vivian passed away, who was a significant civil rights icon, Baptist minister. And in his obituary, it noted that he had been born in Boonville, Missouri, which is like an hour, a little more than an hour from where I live and where I have lived for most of my life. And I thought, I had no idea. I mean, I knew who C.T. Vivian was, but I had no idea that he had been born in Missouri. And so I started doing some research and just trying to figure out, which turned out to be pretty scant. That there wasn't a whole lot of details, but he lived the first 6 years of his life in the state, and because of a house fire, his mother and grandmother moved him when he was 6 to Illinois, and that's where he grew up. Eventually ended up in Nashville at American Baptist College, met John Lewis and a number of other early leaders there in the Nashville sit-in movement, and that's what really got him going into the civil rights movement nationally. And so when Limbaugh died, who everyone knows is from Missouri, unfortunately. And so when he died, and then there was within a week, there were 20 bills to honor Limbaugh by the state legislators. We're naming highways and special days after him. None of it actually passed. I was glad. They wanted to name his birthday a special day, which I'm not sure what we were supposed to do on that day other than go around and call people names to honor him. But I was glad it didn't pass because it's also my birthday. And so I would prefer them to wait and name January 12th after, Brian Kaler Day and not Rush Limbaugh Day. So I was glad that didn't end up passing. But so I wrote a piece for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch about C.T. Vivian, this native son that we have refused to honor. He had a memoir that he was working on when he died, and the publisher reached out to me after that piece and sent me an early copy of it. It's out now, and it's all in the action, I think is the title of it. And he does talk a little bit about some of his early life. And so I've been working with a couple other people. We're trying to figure out if we can figure out where his family lived and find some ways to honor him here in the state. But so far, state lawmakers have not responded and have done nothing to honor C.T. Vivian, which I mean, I keep thinking of the words of Jesus about, no prophet is honored in his hometown, or I guess in this case, his home state. But, this is the most significant civil rights leader from our state, and we're doing nothing to honor him. And I think that when you look at some of the legacy, I mean, Missouri turns 200 years this year in August. And I mean, in this bicentennial, the Missouri Compromise literally gave new life to slavery across the Mississippi out west. Like there's something we need to do as a state to not just celebrate our past, but also honestly deal with the injustices that were done in our name and that then we also did as well. And this would be one way of doing that.
So you mentioned in that article that you were a ditto head as a teenager.
Yeah, I was. I did. I listened to Rush all the time as a teenager.
And when did you stop doing that?
I mean, so college was really when I started to have the evolution and movement. Part of it was as I was feeling a call to ministry of some sort and having professors that were helping me to read the Bible in a way that didn't match the culture. That helped. And also, honestly, I mean, I'll just be honest, 9/11 was the moment that really was like the point for me that I began to really see something else happening at play. I've told this to Bo because he used to work for Sojourners. The first copy of Sojourners that I ever saw in person was their first issue after 9/11. And I had a professor who had handed a copy of it to me because I think he was picking up the fact that I might benefit from reading it and would resonate with it. And that was a time of really starting to wrestle with my politics and my faith, and came out very differently by the time, the Iraq War particularly, and that happens. And I was trying to do some activism against that on my Southern Baptist college campus, which, I had a couple of friends who would join me on that. We weren't necessarily the most popular club. But that was a time of really starting to wrestle with separating out my faith and what does it mean to be a Christian who pledges allegiance to that kingdom and not to a nation and to a party, and starting to try to separate out my politics from some of that.
Keeping along the line with politics and religion, could you tell us or explain to us in the audience either why the Catholic Church is correct in denying or suggesting that, not the entire Catholic Church, sorry, some Catholic bishops are correct in suggesting that President Biden should be denied communion, or why they're wrong in that assertion?
Yeah, I'm happy to tell the Catholic Church what they should do, because
most Protestants I know are really happy to do that right now.
We've been doing that for hundreds of years, so why stop? And so, I think that, I will say this, in general, I think the Catholic Church, the bishops that are pushing this are making a really significant error. I will say the one thing that I think that some of them are right about is this idea that our faith is not just a private spiritual thing. And this is some of what I think President Biden and some of his defenders have incorrectly suggested is this is his faith. This is his spiritual but that's not what our faith. I mean, again, that's Rousseau. I mean, that's what some of the people who were trying to confine Christianity is. They wanted to push it to just a private sphere, and we need to push back against that. And so I think when bishops start talking about, how communion should change the way you act in life, they get accused of being political because we have been so private in separating these out. And so I do want to say that I think there's some truth in that we should expect that Christians would act differently in the public sphere. And
I think that's because in the United Methodist Church, where inclusivity has replaced the gospel, in my opinion,
you just said that.
we talk. I mean, so we talk about how we have an open table, but we ignore the fact that like the invitation to the table is making some distinguishing mark. Like Christ invites to his table all who ... and so that like. That all who is not everybody. so it's implicit in there that you would distinguish between a right reception of the Eucharist and
yeah. I mean, I'm Baptist and I come from a tradition that doesn't do communion a lot generally, and we don't really make a big deal about communion, but I keep pushing back against that. I mean, I tell our church that not that
Jesus
it happens.
Says do this. I don't.
Yes, right. I think we should do it every week, which which, the disciples of Christ, they would say yes. And we would do it like once a month or once a quarter. It's like, that's at that point, it's like, it's not even that significant part of our life, but like, this is the defining thing that the early church did every single time they came together. And I think it's something that should remind us of who we are every moment, not just that we are in communion with God and those in the sanctuary with us, but we are pledging ourselves in communion with those across denominational lines, across national lines, across time. I mean, we are communing with the early church, which is a weird way of thinking about it. But I think for God, like, it's all happening. He's outside of time. And so I think communion is a whole lot more important than Baptists often give it credit. And so, but I think that's part of the concern, though, with the Catholic Church is when you pick out one issue and say, we're going to, on this one topic, we're going to deny communion, that you start becoming part of the political game instead of actually challenging the politics of our culture. Because if they really want to take a full pro-life position, which the Catholic Church is good about having a consistent life ethic, why not also deny communion to the governor of Texas who's killing people with capital punishment, or William Barr, the last attorney general, who was literally given a pro-life award from some Catholics on the day in between two executions? And so, that's the problem with the document, is that it's so focused on winning this one political battle that supports one party in one nation that I think it does risk destroying or hurting what communion is really supposed to be about in the first place.
The Catholic Church in America is not in the same position as the Southern Baptist Convention, but you still have cardinals and bishops who are pretty Trumpy.
Well, and let's be fair. So we often pick on white evangelicals. 81% of white evangelicals voted for Trump, but a majority of white mainline Protestants and a majority of white Catholics also voted for Trump. And so there is an issue here that cuts across Christian traditions, and it is related heavily to race. Obviously, I just made the fact that it's, whiteness seems to be trumping, I think, some of our key, religious principles. And so the Catholic Church is also dealing with some of this as well. I mean, we know that there were some Catholic priests that were at the Capitol on January 6th. One of them from Nebraska said he did an exorcism inside of the U.S. Capitol and talked about how great it was, like in the middle of the insurrection.
Wow.
Tourist gathering.
Sorry.
He was offering he was just there tending to his flock, I guess. I don't know. I don't know how long this joke sounds good that it was a gathering of tourists. Like, I don't know.
It'll continue to be
to push it.
As long as Republicans pretend it never happened, it'll still be funny.
Okay. So it's gonna be funny forever. Good. That's good to hear.
Forever, unfortunately.
Yeah. So I don't even know where to go from there.
Well, that's fair though, right? That's what I keep getting stuck at this point too. The last 5 years with American Christianity in the white church has been incredibly frustrating and disheartening. And it's like, the question I keep coming back to is why this guy? If you wrote this as a novel 10 years ago, no publisher would have picked it up. It would have been, too outlandish that you've got this thrice married casino businessman who, had affairs with porn stars and showed up at Playboy Mansion or in Playboy, magazine, that the white church would flock around him, not just while he's in office, but afterwards, after he loses by the worst margin of any incumbent president since Herbert Hoover, would continue to hold this man up as if he's the greatest, not just political, but religious figure in our country, would literally attack the U.S. Capitol with Christian flags and Bibles and Jesus signs. It would be a farce. If you had written this as a novel 10 years ago, I don't think anyone would have published it because it sounded too crazy. And it's literally what we just lived and we're still living. Well, how did this happen?
And you've written about Russell Moore and Albert Mohler. It's because what we've seen. It's not just I'll hold my nose and vote for this guy. as Moore and Mueller tried to like portray it. It's that you have a whole lot of people who identify as Christians seeming to revel in just the cruelty of the rhetoric. That's what's I think most shocking to me, that as Christians they're participating in rhetoric that's just contrary to the basic claims of our faith.
Well, and all of the disqualifiers that Brian just named off, those are used to highlight why Trump was the chosen, I'm using air quotes here, sent by God, because God is using an imperfect person to save the empire.
I don't remember that imperfect rhetoric when they were attacking Bill Clinton. Which is, I mean, this is a weird thing. Like when I say
Hunter Biden,
I mean, so the Rush Limbaugh teenage version of myself, right? Says
How old are you? How old are you?
I'm 40. I just turned 40 this year.
Right. Yeah, I'm 43.
So,
okay.
So when I say character matters, like now I'm a liberal. And I get called a liberal by like the very people in my church that I grew up in that taught me that character mattered.
They were probably reading the Book of Virtues and yeah,
that's right. And so, it's like the teenage version of me doesn't understand like how I can be a liberal when I say character matters. But like, we finally had the case study that proves that character matters. I mean, if you look at like just the incompetence of the last administration, if you look at the cruelty of what was done, I mean, this is an argument that character does actually matter. Like we finally proved it. But the problem is the people who were arguing it for decades have changed sides on it.
All right. So
this is the moment we finally prove that they're right.
So let's, you can keep your PhD hat on in terms of religion and politics, and let's flip it. I was texting back and forth with a friend of mine, a parishioner and a listener of the podcast, Brad Todd, who runs Republican campaigns. And so we were talking about two things. One is how Democrats in general don't really seem to know how to talk about Joe Biden's Christianity. And he was asking, he was genuinely curious about what accounts for anti-Semitism on the left. Is it just a general discomfort with religion in general? And so you can talk about those two things as a professional.
Good. More easy topics. I appreciate that. So Biden is an interesting figure when it comes to his religion. I mean, in many ways, he is a bit of a throwback to an earlier era, not just like pre-Trump, but even, I mean, we haven't had a president who has been attending worship this frequently since Jimmy Carter. And so, we just haven't seen, even presidents who have talked about their faith, haven't attended this frequently. And so Biden, I mean, is clearly something that is deeply, deeply important to him. It is a core of who he is. And, I think that's one of the things that makes the some of the decisions, the push to deny him communion so odd. Like we have this really devout person whose faith is really important to him. Like this should seem like a moment that the Catholic bishops would celebrate. I mean, I know he's the second Catholic president, but he's the first devout one. I mean, that was, Jackie Kennedy said when she was talking about all the people who were attacking Kennedy for being too Catholic. She's like, the sad thing about it is Jack is such a poor Catholic. Right? And so, but that's so culture has changed here in some ways. Like, so Kennedy's running in 1960 and there's the worry that he's too Catholic. And then we had John Kerry run and now we had Joe Biden, and we hear some people worry that he's not Catholic enough. And they're both actually more Catholic than JFK was, like more devout in their Catholicism. And I think it does show some of the politicization that has happened. And because the Republican Party has so politicized our faith over the last 4 decades, that I do think that the Democratic Party has often acted in opposite of that. So if the Republicans are going to do this, we're going to be the opposite of them. And both parties do that to some extent on issues. And so I do think that the Democratic Party has in some ways tried to overcorrect in response to the Republican Party by playing up their secularism. And I do think that that's part of why some of them aren't sure what to do with Biden, but even though you cannot truly understand or explain Biden without understanding or talking about his faith. And so we're in this weird place. I mean, think about it with the terms of like religious liberty. Another easy topic, right? And so religious liberty is one of those terms that has been so misused on the right. And so religious liberty is supposed to be for all people. I mean, if you don't believe in religious liberty for all, you don't believe in religious liberty for all. And so, you have to be supporting it for all people. It's historically been a shield for the minority, but now it's become a sword for the majority. And a lot of people who are saying they're for religious liberty are actually for Christian nationalism. They want to codify their faith.
What's anxiety about? It's the majority's anxiety about becoming the minority, right?
Correct. Yeah. But so then the flip side of that is, so I have to talk to my conservative friends about why religious liberty should be for all people. But to my liberal friends, I have to talk about why we should care about religious liberty, because I think a lot of them have decided, well, that's just a talking point of the right. Therefore, religious liberty, therefore we're not for it. It's like, no, we need to be for true religious liberty, and that religious liberty actually matters. And so I think we're having that same problem in our discourse around Biden. And I mean, I'm not sure, we're not in a healthy place with either party when it comes to thinking about, faith and the role in politics because of that. And so then you get this anti-Semitism question, which I do wonder how much of that is then this concern about religion in general. Although I would also carve a caveat. I think we have to be clear that criticizing Israel as a nation state is not anti-Semitism. And so that, again, this is one of those terms that unfortunately is being politicized and misused, so that if you criticize, former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, when he was prime minister, if you criticized them bombing Gaza, you were accused sometimes of being anti-Semitic. And that's not anti-Semitism if you're criticizing a nation state just like you would another nation state. But that caveat aside, there really is a true problem with rising anti-Semitism. And I do think that it is this growing concern about religion in general and a discomfort with truly religious people. And so we have to find a way. Again, this is the politics is corrupting our faith in so many ways.
Yeah, I mean, my comment to Brad was that that around Democrats, I feel as though people of faith are welcome, provided that their faith is secondary to the party, or that you not to the party, to liberalism, right? That religion is okay insofar as you reduce it to the golden rule.
Yeah. And, that's one of the, I mean, I'm all for like interfaith efforts, and I've been a part of those, and they're important. But there also comes a point where like Christians have to say, like, this is who we are. Right. And I think too many Christians on the left do a very generic, let's all work together interfaith moment. So that means we have to boil down our faith to, the golden rule, essentially, and, love your neighbor. And there comes a point where, while that's important when we're gathering together and working across those faith lines, we also need to make sure that we have spaces where we're saying, I'm a Christian, like I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. And there's a reason why I'm not just a generic liberal, or that I'm not a liberal of this faith tradition or that faith tradition. Like there's a reason why I am a Christian liberal or Christian progressive or a Christian whatever. And I think that that's one of the things that has been lost too much on the left, is the fact that there's still something about the gospel that matters and that defines who we are and why we do what we do.
And I think, and maybe it's the case in all of our traditions. I think you see it in the United Methodist churches, just kind of generic liberalism, but also in the Southern Baptist conventions, the ease with which it slips into nationalism, that if there was ever an era where we could assume the gospel and then go do other things, it's clearly not that time now.
Yeah. So there was a time period, 4 decades ago, where if your pastor said something that disagreed with your chosen political party, that you would change your politics. And this is research that Robert Putnam and David Campbell have done. And they have found in more recent years that if that comes into conflict, you're more likely to change your church or change your pastor. If you can't fire the pastor, you'll just change your church. Sorry, guys. But that, I mean, and when I tell pastors this, it's actually worse than it sounds. It's not that. So what's happened is that party ID has become the new religion.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not that church is second. It's that church is only tolerated as long as you go along with the party ID religion. And so we're creating these blue churches and these red churches that are more tied to the changing and shifting political platforms and more tied to ID and labels and the other teachings that we claim are these like timeless teachings that have been handed down to us for thousands of years, right? They're pushed aside if they don't match. And that's a big shift in the last 4 decades in our culture.
I mean, that's a good point that there's a sense in which Donald Trump empowered churches on the left and the right to become who they already were kind of under the mask, right?
Yeah, he's a symptom. He didn't create the problem.
The Tier and I are both aware of a church plant that shall remain nameless that intentionally marketed itself after the 2016 election as being a church for blue people, and which is like contrary to Paul's justification of the ungodly, and it's just like I'm going to intentionally rule out 50% of my potential audience.
So I mean, we talked about communion quite a bit so far today, and to me, one of the most prophetic and profound things that's happened the last several years has been Election Day communion. I don't know if you all are familiar with that concept.
We had a whole episode about that. Yeah.
All right. Excellent.
We
I've listened to a bunch of episodes and I missed that one. So I'll go back and check that out because I think that's one of the most needed things in our culture right now.
Well, we're going to have you on with Fred Schmidt, who we had on, and he is not a fan of Election Day communion.
Oh, really? See, I love Election Day communion. I mean, the service that I attended when I lived in Virginia at the Mennonite congregation, that would have been election night 2012. One of the most profound worship services that I've ever been in my entire life. And I say that as a political junkie, right? I mean, the service started just as the polls closed. So normally I'm like pulling up the exit polls and refreshing as fast as possible. And I had to like force myself to set the phone down and sit in the service for a communion centered service. There was no sermon. There was some scripture reading and some songs and some other, devotional thoughts, but there was no full blown sermon. It was a service centered around communion at that moment when other forces were literally trying to tear us, our churches apart. I think that those are the types of things, that prophetic imagination that we need in a moment like this, when party ID is defining who we are, including our churches. We have to find a way to challenge that. And I do think there is something profound in communion that can help us remind us who we really are and who we're supposed to be.
So if you've listened to the podcast, you know that we like to end the podcast with the 10 questions from inside the actor studio. So I'm hoping you haven't thought about it too much, but Tier, take it away.
Brian, what is your favorite word?
Yeah, that's a tough question for me. I mean, so my PhD is in political communication. I love words. And so, I mean, that probably changes from time to time. But a word that I keep coming back to is presuppose. And I have always loved that word because there's just something comical about it. I mean, to suppose something is to make assumptions or judgments about something ahead of time. And now we're going to presuppose. And I just find that conjuring out into the future to be really hilarious. And particularly, I mean, then we have theological arguments about presupposition and so forth. And I'm just like, wow, like we're really have no idea what we're thinking or talking about here. If we're presupposing. So I like that word. It's just comical, the idea that we could presuppose something at all.
That's really funny. That's good. That's really good. I hate it when we have guests and their favorite word is like whatever we just talked about, like they have a book about grace. And so then they tell us their favorite word is grace. Like, it's just nope.
All
right.
What's your least favorite word?
So, I mean, this is going to sound weird, but it's because I'm an editor now. The worshipers, and I know that sounds weird. I actually like the word in general, but like no one can figure out how to spell that correctly. Or worshiping, like everybody wants to put 2 P's in there, and that's British. But if I do it the American way with 1 P, then people think I have spelled the word wrong. Like, I mean, even like Associated Press, which is like usually like the gold standard for how we're supposed to spell things. will often put two P's in there, and I'll go and take it out because, I mean, we fought a revolution, people. We're not British anymore. And so, you know, I don't know. I get frustrated every time, but I have to use that word all the time because I'm literally doing religious journalism. And so we're always talking about worshipers and worshiping. And I'm always afraid that somebody's going to read it and think, I don't know how to spell it.
One of my pet peeves is referring to people as churched or unchurched. Yeah.
What turns you on?
You know, I'd have to say just humor.
What turns you off?
Hold on here.
These are supposed to be rapid fire, and you won't shut up.
I'm curious. Like Bo said, we would hit it off, so I'm just trying to make.
Well, he didn't say his wife.
Make Bo feel well. Like, do you listen like to comedians and stuff?
I mean, we do. I mean, you know, and you're going to this question in a moment about language. I mean, one of the things we struggle with is a lot of comedians use a lot more foul language than I tend to, and that we definitely don't want my son to watch. But yeah, we enjoy watching some of the Netflix specials and some of the comedians, and I enjoy, and I don't. My wife says I don't do it enough. I enjoy trying to play with writing some fun things. I did some competitive, you know, speech and debate in high school and college, and one of the events I did really well at was after dinner speaking, which is comedy, and I write sometimes a hilarious editorial, sometimes very sarcastic. And a couple of them won awards this year. And she's like, see, I told you you're supposed to be funny more. And I don't do it enough. There's so much serious stuff happening in the world that I forget to be funny. But I enjoy good satire. I mean, Stephen Colbert has long been about my favorite comedian. I mean, I like him on his current show, but I still miss the Colbert Report.
That's funny. I mean, you talk about parenting. I took my son and a geezer from my congregation. We went to see Lewis Black in DC when he was like 11. And it was mostly appropriate. The opening act was definitely not appropriate at all. But
that's right. You can always pay for therapy later. So
yeah, or right now. Yeah. Tier, go ahead. Sorry.
What turns you off?
I mean, I think it would be like just like being ignored or someone not being interested.
What's your favorite curse word?
Oldest child thing.
Yeah. So, and I just made a comment that I don't. I mean, I grew up Southern Baptist, right? I mean, we don't. Was it drinks, smoke, chew, or go with girls who do? You know, but so the one that I've always enjoyed, and I enjoy it for a very probably unreligious, inappropriate reason. But I always enjoy it because we would sing it at Christmas time, because we would always sing the second verse of what child is this? Mm-hmm. About the ox and ass. And I still
the Bible.
I'm sorry, I'm 40 years old. I still laugh every year at Christmas when we sing that song because I think it's hilarious that we sing that in church. And as a kid, I always thought that was hilarious. And of course, me and my friends, we would sing that line louder than the rest of the song. Because it was like the one time we could get away with it.
That's why Balaam's ass doesn't come up in the lectionary.
That's right.
What's your favorite sound?
I mean, I would have to say, I mean, when my son is 9, it's just when it doesn't do it as much as when he was younger, but when he has that like uncontrollable giggle, to like he just can't even stop, can't hardly breathe. This pure joy is what it is. That sound of pure joy.
What sound do you hate?
So this is an answer that is definitely a post-COVID, or we're still in COVID, but a since COVID answer. So I have hearing aids. I'm very deaf, and I mean with the hearing aids I'm okay, but I'm very deaf about them. And they do well, and technology has improved a lot in the last 20 years that I've been wearing hearing aids, but the fans mess with them. And so fans is my answer now, because everywhere I go, everyone has like 20 fans going on to purify the air for COVID. And it just really messes with the sound quality. And sometimes it picks them up weird. And that's like, all I can hear is just this like fan wind noise, even if I'm not next to it. And so I despise fans.
What profession other than what you do now would you like to try one day?
Yeah. I mean, that's a tough one for me, because I mean, I've always just wanted to be a writer. And so I've done it in some way or another, different ways of getting a paycheck. I mean, whatever I did, it would not be an 8 to 5 job, like where I'm sitting in the office, because I've not been forced to do that, and I'm not cut out for that. I like the freedom that I have, and I'm working at home right now. I was working at home before it was cool with COVID, and so that was a pretty easy transition for me. And so, I mean, honestly, the one that I always keep flirting with, and I won't do it because, you know, it wouldn't actually work as a career, would be running for office. But I won't win because I say too many unpopular ideas. I'm not willing to.
Yeah, Missouri's probably not
myself.
a place for you to run.
Yeah. So, and yeah, I'm definitely not in a good place right now. I mean, we have Senator Fist Pump representing our state, Josh Hawley, and so, you know, I don't think that my ideas are going to get too many votes here. So, the good news is, I guess, is my career choice isn't going to happen.
Isn't that guy who waved his gun at the Black Lives Matter people? Isn't he running for governor or senator or something like?
Our other Senate seat is currently our former governor Eric Greitens, who resigned office in scandal from, you know, like sex scandals and other things, and also then the guy who waved his gun, and our attorney general who is suing China. I'm not sure how that works, and yeah, it's a mess. And so, I mean, Senator Hawley might not be the craziest senator we have in a year and a half.
Just the most craven. That's all.
Yeah.
What profession would you not like to try?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would. I don't know. It could be a number of things. I think it would just be one where I'm sitting at a desk, 8 to 5, really probably doing anything. I mean, I would even enjoy, you know, more manual labor, I think, than that, because I enjoy getting out and doing stuff as a break and mental break and that kind of thing. But I just that monotony every day.
Definitely doesn't want to be sitting at a desk.
Yeah.
And last one, since heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Here's Bo Underwood.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you know, I want to say something just like the classic answer, like, you know, welcome in or good job or that kind of stuff. But, you know, honestly, I would like it to be something more unexpected, honestly, of just, you know, and I'm not in the sense of like, you don't think you're coming in here, do you? But like in a sense of like, isn't this cool? Like it's here. Let's go check it out. You know, as opposed to just the kind of pat answer, because I mean, not that I don't try to be the, you know, well done, good and faithful servant. I try to live up to that, but let's be honest, that's not why I'm going to make it in. And so, you know, that's not necessarily the answer that I'm looking for. I'm looking more for the, like, this is going to surpass the wildest imaginations that you even had. So let's go check it out.
Is this your way of killing time? Have you found God or just lost your mind? You prefer the straight up path so much so that you lost your life. Well, I'm not saying that I think you've lost your way. Sometimes praying means you think that there's no other way. And that's the last thing I will say. Listen to your conscious fears that tell you